Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. My name is affifah and my partner's name is Rashid Kaur. Today we are going to present to you guys about our assignment, which is developing assessment for listening skills, and our course number is EEAL3353, Teaching, Listening and Speaking. For this assessment, the students will acquire necessary listening skills in order to follow the comprehend course this course, such as lectures, conversations, interview, and discussions. Before we get started, I would like to explain to you guys briefly about our what is learning objectives and what is learning outcomes. So learning objectives describe what you as a teacher want to teach your students, and they are usually more specific than learning goals. It is not necessarily observable nor measurable. Uh, it is more teacher-centered rather than student-centered, and it can be useful in uh, it can be useful in helping you as a teacher to formulate more specific learning outcomes. For learning outcomes, it describes what students can achieve or do after completing a project, course, program, or the task, and they are usually concise and then meaningful and more student-centered. Now you have to understand what is learning outcome and learning objective. We can proceed to our learning objectives and learning outcome based on our assessment that we have provided to the students. As you can see here, we have created 3 learning objectives and 3 learning outcomes. These are uh, the the learning objectives and learning outcome based on our assessment that we have given, and and, and it should be the students or the teacher should be able to achieve this learning objectives and learning outcomes at the end of this lesson. So for learning objectives, at the end of this lesson, the students should be able to identify to identify the right answer based on the audio played. And then the second one is at the end of this lesson, the students should be able to develop the global listening abilities of the students, and the students should be able to expose to a number of different situations through listening assessment. So the objectives are just like what I have said. It is more teacher-centered rather than student-centered. So learning objectives focus more on what the teacher wants the student to achieve. For learning outcomes, the student at the end of this lesson, the student should be able to apply the right answer based on the audio played in the class or at at the class. And then the second one is this at the end of this lesson, the student should be able to analyze the global listening abilities of the students. And the last one is at the end of this lesson, the student should be able to justify a number of different situations students can handle through listening assessment. So it is learning outcomes are more on the student's perspective or their understanding. So I guess that's the end for my presentation. I will give the next slide to I will hand the next slide to Rashid.
Hello Madam Shamila and to all my classmates, my name is Rashid Kaur. So now I would like to continue explain about our listening assessment. So for this listening assessment, me and my groupmate Affifah have chosen audio recorded materials for this listening assessment for student. Because if we use audio recording, it is more reliable for students to listen and answer all the questions provided. And then when using audio recordings, it's more focused on real life communication and is related to education. For example, if we use authentic materials, it is based on podcasts or YouTube videos. It mostly focuses on like their experiences, past life stories, which some of them might explain in broken languages, or some certain words which is hard for students to understand. While in audio recorded materials, some recorded materials are prepared for education purpose. So we can use that kind of recorded materials for our students when we assess them. So we can create question assessment tests based on the recordings. So it's important to use recorded materials which is suitable for students to understand, because in recorded materials we can see that the speed is always the same. It's not going fast or slow in the communication, and the languages they use in the recorded materials is always the simple languages. If we listen to podcasts or YouTube videos, they usually use some words which they might not be able to understand. Next is, before we start with our listening assessment, for teachers it is important to give them a brief idea explanation on what is the listening assessment is going to be about. For example, for our group, we are going to give them a listening assessment based on describing people, and the part 2 will be on interview with a swimmer. So for the part 1, we have prepared a brief slide, just a short slide for the student, so that they will have an idea and to understand what they are going to write about later. So since our listening assessment is focusing on lower secondary student, which is form 1 student, I think it is important to give them like a brief idea explanation on what we are going to assess them about for listening test. So for the listening test, there are some questions about types of hair. So there are 3 types of hair, which is straight, curly, and wavy. So I'm sure that they are still in lower secondary. Some of them might have no idea about what is curly, what is wavy. So I have prepared slides for them to understand better what is the difference between curly and wavy, so that it will be easy for them to apply answer in the assessment sheet. Okay, so lastly, before we begin with the listening assessment. It is important for the teacher to prepare the materials for students. So once the teacher have prepared the materials, they need to give it to the students so that they can look into the paper what are the questions is going to be about and how they should answer all the questions. And then me and Afifa, for the listening assessment, we have prepared 2 different types of topic for listening assessment. And then for each topic, we have 2 to 3 questions. So there are questions like true false question, fill in the blanks, and then ranging number 1 to 5 accordingly, and also circling the correct answers. And in each question consists of 5 marks, and then one of the question of first topic, second question consists of 10 marks, because it has many blanks and then they need to fill in the correct answer. So after the students have answered all the assessment, it is important for teacher to have discussion after the class. So after the assessment, teacher can have discussion with the class so that they can stay engaged within the topic that they have been tested about. So for the listening test, for the second interview is more to interview with a swimmer, where the swimmer talks about his daily life routine, where he wakes up in the morning and then what time he has lunch. So after the assessment, maybe teachers can talk about with the students about what do they do after schools, what are their daily routines in their lives. So that's how they can engage with their students, by asking asking them question which is related to the test, and keep them engaged in the class. That's all from us. Thank you for listening.